Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Life of an NPC. I'm not going to give the specific number for this episode because last time I got a bit confused with that one, but thanks for joining in, guys. And today I wanted to discuss a topic which seems quite broad, but also quite specific, and I think one that we can all relate to. And it's about time. Now, before want to get into this, I'm going to try and be a bit more relaxed today. I've noticed with my first few episodes I seem quite tense, and I just want to be quite chilled here. And I've got my camera on again, obviously depending on whether you're listening to this or you're watching it on YouTube. Um, but I've managed to book a room to do this video today, hence the strange picture in the background, which I've blurred out for this video. But yeah, I've also got myself a cup of tea here, which kind of reflects what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Because by the time I finish this cup of tea, the video will be over. Yeah, the reason why I want to talk about time is because it's very important for all of us, and time is finite. We're only on this planet for so long, for example, and in that sense, it's a matter of using that time to its maximum efficiency, really. I mentioned before in my video about the gym, how some people make the excuse of not having enough time in the day to um, to go to the gym. In which case, you make time, and yeah, I want to discuss that here as well, because some might say that time is just a concept, like it doesn't really exist. Everything with what's going on around us is just within our own heads. But in that sense, why do people even struggle with time? Time management, that sort of thing. Because you can easily get lost in your own heads, like taking too much time on social media, for example. You get lost in terms of tracking time, and before you know it, it's it's time for that next meeting. It's time to go out for that meal, and you're barely even ready because you haven't spent the right time, the productive time, to be doing that activity, for example. Now, I do understand that for some people, especially ones that do full-time jobs, full-time work in specific industries such as the hospital, nursing, police work, you're given long hours to do, and that does restrict time a lot more. Or even if you jump in between 12-hour shifts a day at night, and it can mess up your sleeping pattern. I get that. So I'm not targeting a specific demographic, but I'm just on about in terms of how you could potentially improve your time management in order to try and gain better control of how you can manage your life, basically. In terms of how this applies to an NPC, like myself, for example, because I'm autistic, I can be very self-aware about time. I like to wake up at a certain time in the mornings, especially for work, because I have to set off at a specific time in order to get to work when I want to go in, avoid traffic, etc. Um, so yeah, it is important for me in that way. I remember I watched a documentary once on BBC iPlayer called "Inside Our Autistic Minds," and the person who hosted the show was autistic himself, and he interviewed a bunch of autistic people, and one of them was very time sensitive. Um, so if he set off to work at a particular point in the day and the bus didn't turn up, for example, he would get very frustrated because his entire routine has been messed up by public transport not turning up, and he therefore might procrastinate, for example. Now I do get that. I do sometimes feel like time is against me. I may stress to get somewhere at a particular point. Say if I'm going to train, go to the gym at 4:30 or 5 in the evening, and if there's traffic, I'll get really frustrated. So yeah, I think people can definitely relate to that in some capacity. And then you go to rush around, you're stressing. It's not pleasant. And in terms of how you can improve that, you just have to try and manipulate time to your advantage, plan ahead, sort of thing. What I like to do is go on Google Maps, see how long it would take me to arrive at a particular destination. Um, Again, it takes a few seconds to just to look from that viewpoint, and by planning ahead, you can therefore estimate what the journey will be like. Again, life is a journey. Um, we're always thinking that time goes so fast at the moment. Like, I'm 24 years old. I'm nearly 25 in about 4 or 5 months from the point where this episode is recorded. And that's scary to consider that I'm going to be 25 in a matter of months, and then therefore I'm a quarter of a century old. That is scary. Um, and that's why I really want to get a move on with this podcast. I've only just recently started producing it on social media platforms, which should have been done a lot sooner, which it seems bad, but I'm working at my own pace, my own time, deciding when I'm ready, because there is no rush with this sort of thing. But then again, something bad might happen to me tomorrow. Touch wood, hopefully not. Um, but yeah, don't want to be jinxing anything. Um, Another reason that inspired me to do this particular concept, this episode, was because I quite like watching a lot of Christopher Nolan films. Now, I know some of you watch my TikTok page, Cine by Its Media, and I like to discuss films. I do like Christopher Nolan as a director, and he's done films such as Inception, Oppenheimer, The Prestige, etc. Now, in terms of how time relates to that, you could say in Inception, time is a dream because it's the concept of is a dream within a dream within a dream. Oppenheimer, time is destructive. It's about J. Robert Oppenheimer creating the atomic bomb, which would then be used to create atomic weapons by the military. And then in that sense, time is destructive, especially in terms of wars, etc. And then you got the Prestige, which is about magicians, and therefore it translates to time being an illusion. I really like those ideas, and those stay in my head quite a lot. Sorry, the building I'm in right now is quite social. There's people walking around all the time, so it puts me on edge a little bit. Plus, there's a spider in the corner, and I hope it's dead, but not that I'm wishing harm on animals whatsoever. But spiders freak me out. Yeah, time's been, well, obviously all around us, but because one of my favorite programs is Doctor Who, the machine in that, the TARDIS, time and relative dimensions of space, I just love that concept to be able to travel through time because time influences everything. Like, I wish I could go back in history and just be able to watch events unfold. Obviously, if I could go back to particular points in time and change those events for the better, I would. But then you'd have the butterfly effect, where if you change a particular point, it then changes the future. If you want better examples of that, watch Back to the Future or the Butterfly Effect. Um, but yeah, we often think about why is time so short? Like, think about this logically. In our lifetimes, if we're alive for what, at least 60 to 80 years, double the lifespan of what it was like 100 years ago, due to numerous reasons like advances in medical science and so on. In terms of the timeline of Earth, we are barely on this planet for a second of the Earth's lifespan. Like, the Earth is already what? How many million years old now? And how much longer it has to last, I don't know. So, in terms of how long we have on this planet, you have to make the most of the time that you have because you don't know when it will run out. Like your parents, for example, if they're in their 40s, their 50s, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, time's growing so fast. I remember when you were, little, and now yeah, you get lost." Especially doing a full-time job Monday to Friday, then you've only got your weekends free, and you lose track of time in that sense. Like, I've been in my current job for just over a year now, and that has flown so fast. Um, because often you think like, oh, I can't wait for the weekend, and then the weekend goes, and then you can't wait for the next weekend, and the week after that, you become this vicious cycle, especially in terms of keeping that routine of doing whatever you do before or after work. And even when it comes to the weekends, you're only allowed 48 hours before you have to get back into the routine of work. And whatever you do with your weekends is completely up to you. I like to try and optimize it to its fullest potential if I can. Obviously, doing what I like to do, recording podcasts, watching videos, going to the gym, roughly one workout per weekend. I don't want to be spending both days going to the gym because you need those rest days. Spending time with friends, family, and obviously, most people like to catch up on sleep. Like, they prefer to have a lie-in on weekends. But why? Because then you're automatically giving up your free time to sleep more. Like, do you really want to be doing that? I don't know. It just feels like you're wishing your time away, and when you're sleeping. I mean, it's nice, but in terms of more productive things that you could be doing, spending time with your loved ones, going out and seeing the world. I really want to try and see the world a lot more. Like this year, I've been on holiday to Edinburgh and Tenerife. Now, might not seem like a lot to you guys, but those are my first times on a plane and visiting actual different areas of the world rather than just being restricted to England, which was a big stepping stone for me in terms of confidence. And I obviously want to do a lot more of that. Obviously, again, that's restricted by how much annual leave you're allowed off in your job. Now, I'm not saying give up your job and just focus on enjoying yourself. No, I'm not saying to do that at all. Um, it's just a matter of enjoying yourself, really, because we're only on this planet for so long. As I've said, that's the point of this video. It's a matter of enjoying yourself, whilst also giving back to your enjoyment, your job. Do your job, you get paid, use that money to enjoy yourself. That could be whatever it wants, having a drink, playing games, going on holiday, etc. So yeah, time again is scary. It's a very scary thing, and I don't think I could talk about it for an entire hour. But yeah, it's quite a hard concept to talk about time, because what kind of inspired me to do this video, um, I quite like Hans Zimmer, who's a musician, a composer for cinema. I've already listed some of the films that he's done music for: Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Da Vinci Code, etc. And those instrumental pieces really started to get the ideas flowing in my head whilst I'm working. And after this podcast, I want you to go and listen to the aptly named song called Time, which he did for Inception. And when I first listened to that, it got me thinking, the instruments used in it, you got your violins and a bit of drum in there and so on. I'm not a musician, so I'm not too familiar on what instruments are used in it. But when listening to it, it starts rather slow and it slowly picks up. It's more dramatic, it's more fast paced. Um, and when it gets to the end of the song, it reverts back to how it started, but this time with simple piano tones. And the scary bit for me was it seems to reflect life, how it starts slow. You're growing up, you've been born, you're growing up, etc. And time does feel slow when you're a child, I believe. But when you get a lot older, um, such as now in your 20s to your 50s, you think time is going very fast. Hence why in the song there's loads of violins and dramatic effects. And then it starts to slow down again. And you got these simple piano tones, which are rather delicate. And I believe they reflect old age, because as the song comes to a conclusion, the piano tones get a lot simpler and slower. And then after the final note, it fizzles out. You like, and the song ends. And listening to that, I thought that is literally a perspective, a timeline of someone's life. It's quite scary. But like I say, go and listen to that song. I know that was a morbid few minutes, but go and listen to that song, and then you'll see where I'm coming from. And I think it will shift your perspective a lot more. Like, I haven't watched Inception all the way through, so I'm not quite sure on the context of how that song is used in the film, but I can gather from that where Hans Zimmer was going with it. It's very clever. It's very subtle, and I like subtle stuff like that. So yeah. And even in terms of like watching things, like watching films, etc., you always worried, oh, how long is this film? Oh, it's only an hour and a half. It's nothing. 2 hours plus. It's like, can I make it last that long? I can easily last a 2 hour, 3 hour film, depending on the location. Like if you're at home, you can just like, oh, pause it whilst you go and do other things, and then just come back to it later, which is the beauties of streaming services. wonderful thing, the 21st century. But if you go to watch it at the cinema, you think, oh, a 3 hour film just stuck in a cinema seat. You don't want to be doing that. Again, it's how you want to use that time. If you enjoy watching that, then just go for it. You know, if other people can't, then that's their problem. Because with the invention of TikTok and other social media platforms, they've drastically altered our attention span. Hence why so many people these days have ADHD, attention deficit disorder, all those types of things, because they're just used to the constant scrolling. They haven't got time to watch video after video that's longer than 3 seconds, which is so scary because that was what puts me off putting these videos on there, because you just know, are people even going to give me the time of day after I've spent my time to make this content for them? Obviously, it depends on how interactive you make that content. Like, as I say, it's taken me 4 to 5 months just to get this podcast going anywhere, in terms of buying the mic, finding the location to film, finding the time to film, learning how different software tools work. And obviously, I've had big holidays in between and just focusing on work and other things in my life. But yeah, productivity, time, it's a penny for every time that I've said time in this video. But yeah, no matter who it is, just give them the time of day. You're not the most important thing in the world. No one is. Everyone thinks that the whole world revolves around them. You definitely think that when you're a kid, but when you're an adult, yeah, definitely cut back on that. I mean, I certainly have. I'm always worried about saying no to people. I always want to try and make people happy when I can, but then it sometimes comes at the cost of, am I making myself happy? Absolutely, yes, definitely. Like, I think I'm happier than I've ever been. But even in terms of the gym, am I happy with my physique? Absolutely. But anyway, back on topic. Um, yeah, you should always have time for people, no matter who it is, your friends, your family. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I do struggle to make time for family sometimes, especially since I've sort of moved out of home, and I don't see my parents nowhere near as much as I used to, which is natural because most of the time that you do spend with your family are when you're a lot younger, and as you approach your 20s and you look towards moving out. That's the point of university. You move out to try and acclimatize to being an adult. I didn't do that because I felt like I didn't feel the need to. I mean, if I went to university now, I felt like I'd be more confident than ever to live by myself. I know how to cook, I can drive, etc. Whereas 5, 6 years ago, when I was living at home, I didn't have that independency like I do now. Obviously, I've had 6 years difference there, but it's just the way it is, really. Work around yourself, but at the same time, work around other people to make them happy. Because think of how much time your parents have given up for your well-being to make you happy. It's not hard to give it back to them because they look after you growing up, and as they're growing old, after you've grown up, you have to look after them. It's the circle of life, the timeline of life. I hope this all makes sense to all of you. I'm not just blabbering rubbish. I mean, I sort of am, because in terms of the notes that I've made, I've pretty much already gone through what I was going to talk about already, which is a bit bad. Um, so yeah, what else can I talk about? Yeah, location. I may try and do a bit more videos in this specific room if I get the chance to, because my boss has been very kindly to book this room out for me for an hour, which I've done after work. Again, making the time after work to do productive things. Trust me, that's how you manage your time a lot better. If you don't do that, like even this evening, I promise you, I'm going to be spending time with my girlfriend and possibly have time to watch a bit of a film, play a bit of a game, and that's just using your time effectively. My average day is 16 to 18 hours long, I'd say. If it's a weekend, like a Friday night, my full day would probably, yeah, about 18 hours. 16 to 18 hours, it's standard. But I feel like if your days are shorter than that, then and you're prioritizing sleep, then I'd start to worry a bit because I don't want to spend the later parts of my 20s sleeping. Now is the time um, to get a move on in life. That's why I want this podcast to go. I want it to be progressive. Like all things, the gym, you start off small, then you get more progressive. You want to lift more weights, you want to go more consistently, and so on. Same with work. I've been in this job for a year and I still want to progress with it a lot more, whilst obviously still doing this podcast because I like to do this. And let's say it's autumn now from the time of this recording, and things are starting to hibernate. It's a nice season. The trees, the leaves are dying, turning orange. It's colourful, it's beautiful, but it's also a time of a bit of morbidity as you start to reflect on this year. Because at the start of 2023, one of my New Year's resolutions was to start my own website. And over time, that translated to starting my own website. Starting my own podcast, which is kind of the same thing. I can still create a website from this if I wanted to. I mean, I've got a hosting platform for me to produce these podcasts on, which is incredibly handy. And it wasn't immediately easy for me to find. I've had to learn all this myself. If you want to learn a new skill, most of that is going to come off your own bat. Having to learn these new techniques and strategies yourself because people aren't always going to tell you what to do. And sometimes it's better that way. Like like driving, for example, you can spend as many hours as you want being taught how to drive, but at the end of the day, you're possibly only being taught about 60, 70% of driving after you test your theory and your practical and you come to drive by yourself on the road. That's when you really learn because there's no one else around to help you. You have to adapt to those scenarios yourself. Like if you were to talk to me about driving, I'm definitely no Jeremy Clarkson. I've made mistakes whilst I've driven, car accidents, etc. But you learn from that. You learn not to do that again. Um, so long as you don't come at it too much of a cost. Like simply repairing your car, that's fine, but don't ever lose a life whilst you're driving because you'll instantly regret that for the rest of your life, and you don't want regrets. Definitely not. Well, I've nearly finished this cup of tea, that's for sure. I like to do that. Treat myself to a cup of tea a couple of times a week. I usually survive on coffee for most of the time in the mornings. I'll have no more than two coffees a day in the morning. Power up, make me more productive, as well as obviously drink water, which I advertised in my last video, I suppose, if it's published by the time this one is published. But yeah, I think that's everything I want to discuss in this episode, to be honest. Um, because although you may not think about time all that much, it does play into our lives a lot. We plan our lives around time because that's how the world works. And if you fail to keep ahead of time, like one of my all time goals has always been to manage my time effectively. And I think in terms of how far I've come, I've definitely done that. Like when I was at university, I really struggled with managing my time. I think everyone does. You don't seem to realize, oh, you want to be partying and just having a good time. But when it comes to the hard work of planning and making those essays, you don't always put the time aside to do that. Yeah, don't ever do that because then it will come at the cost as you failing your degree. I never had that, thankfully. I suppose another example that you could place about time is in sand timers. I like sand timers; they're a very cool concept. It's this very unique and old-fashioned design of you got sand in this weird framed bottle, and when you turn it, depending on how long that sand timer goes on for, it could be 5 minutes, half an hour. You're watching the grains of sand poured away, and if you're watching that, you are just literally wasting your time because you are watching time go. Well, same as watches. Watches are a very cool design. The fact that you've got all these little cogs and pins inside this little device on your wrist. I mean, I know I don't have one. They're very cool design. People like to wear them. I haven't got one myself because I think for the price that they are, it's a bit excessive. I haven't really got the money to be affording expensive jewelry or clothes. But yeah, in terms of how time is influences us, quite a few cool concepts right there. I know these days you've got all your smartwatches, but they kind of take away the character of what makes the standard watch so special, you know? Um, but ultimately, it's up to you how you want to keep track of time like that. So long as you know how to manage your time effectively, then there's nothing wrong with that. I remember mentioning on a previous episode that I had never passed my maths GCSE. Well, guess what? I have. A couple of weeks ago, I finally passed it for the first time in regards of how many attempts it took for me to actually pass it in the first place. When you take into account how many times I did it at GCSE level, during my A levels, and then the gap between when I started university to doing my full time job, in which case he got asked, "Where is your maths GCSE?" I had to take that extra time out to revise in my own time to learn and improve that skill. Now, undoubtedly, I think that's the end point of what I want to push across from this video, as you probably would have guessed, or podcasts, audio, whatever. Um, yeah, adapt yourself to learn new things whilst you can, because you won't always be able to one day. Something can happen to you one day where you lose a limb or you have dementia or something. Believe me, I mean, I've had grandparents who had dementia, and over time you slowly watch them sort of fade away, and it's unpleasant. So that's what I'm saying, is because this podcast is aimed at younger people, I urge you guys to make the most of your time whilst you still can. When you're a teenager, you all fall into that same boat. You just want to have a good time. You're not really too fussed about pleasing people. You just make them out of what makes you happy. I strongly agree with that. I know in life we don't always want to do things that we enjoy, but how you aim to improve yourself moving forward is how you apply your time. So yeah, hopefully you guys managed to take in quite a bit of what I said there. And hopefully it just didn't sound like absolute rubbish. I just wanted to try and talk about something that everyone can relate to. It's all well and good talking about the gym and autism, but that might only apply to specific kind of people. Um, but I am grateful that you guys have taken the time to get up to this point in terms of my podcasting and to listen to this episode. Um, because you may have been doing things like driving to work, um, working, or being one of those mad people who can listen to a podcast whilst they're training. I don't know how you can do that, but all credit to you for trying. Or even if you're just chilling, ready to go to sleep and listen to the soothing sounds of my voice. Yeah, I'm a bit sarcastic, so I'm going to try and bring that more into my videos moving forward. I know some of my friends are aware I'm sarcastic, but yeah, these podcasts are about me as well as other people. So I want to bring my own sense of character into these a lot more and make them more unique in that sense. Because for life, I know there's other content out there and videos about the life of an NPC, but I want to make this personal about me as well as the people that I'm going to interview. So yeah, that's all I wanted to discuss for today. I think. If not, I'll probably bring it up in another episode moving forward. But yeah, thanks guys for listening, and I look forward to you listening in the next episode.